Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast. This is Ethan Nash, and with me today we have once again my colleague and friend, Hana Butler. Hana, welcome back to the show for I don't know how many times you've been on the show, but welcome back.
No, thanks, Ethan. Good to be back.
And today we are, or really, I'm going to be asking you some questions about empathy, which is a topic you've been thinking a lot about lately. And let's just start with maybe a definition. And I actually think this is important because I think I hear a lot of different definitions of empathy, and we walk around thinking empathy is good or empathy is not good, and yet
Mm.
we're like on totally different sheets of paper as far as what we're talking about here. So we talk past each other. So long runway, but what is empathy?
Yeah, yes, definitions help. So I'm gonna reference Brene Brown's work on this, and she pulls a lot of her information from Teresa Weissman and and Dr. Kristen Neff. But her definition, Brene Brown, is that empathy is the ability to name the emotion underpinning an experience.
Hmm.
So to name the emotion underpinning an experience.
Okay. All right. So name and emotion, and I'm taking notes as we're doing this episode because I'm learning. Um, Name an emotion that underpins the experience. And is that like a definition for like I can have empathy for myself as well as empathy for other people by underpinning the emotion in myself and underpinning the potential emotion that someone else might be experiencing?
Yeah, so the ability to name it. So let's just also start there for fun, because how many emotions can most adults name, do you think?
I'm gonna say like six.
That's generous.
Okay. All right. I could try right now, like sad,
Yeah.
mad, happy. There's a bunch
That's
of
it.
variations of
Okay.
happy.
So even if you just stop there, most adults can do that. Three,
Okay.
happy, sad, pissed off. Now, again, in her Brene Brown's work in Atlas of the Heart, she really took on kind of the work of mapping the human emotion.
Mhm.
And she was able to identify 83 different variances of those main categories.
Hmm.
But the point being that the ability to name an emotion underpinning experience is a really big ask that most of us from certain generations were not set up for the granularity or the emotional literacy to do that very well.
Hmm.
We love to put them in broad categories, and I'm not saying that that can't work, but that's just this. So there's one part of empathy, which that's a whole other podcast. The
Hmm.
ability to name the emotions underpinning experiences when we have a limited vocabulary. So when we look at empathy as a skill, I've just got to give a little shout out and prerequisite to that many of us are limited in our literacy, our diction, right, our ability to name a lot of emotions. So that's there. We could spend a whole podcast talking about that, but
Hmm.
uh, the ability to name the emotions underpinning experience and how accurate we are in naming the emotions of ourselves or others is how well that sense of empathy gets translated
Hmm.
or felt by others.
Okay. Yeah. And so then, I mean, this is maybe where you were going next, but so we kind of defined empathy. What is why is it good? Let's start there. Like, I mean, we all
Yeah.
hear it, especially in the workplaces a lot. It's good. Let's cultivate it.
Yes.
Why?
Yeah. I think this is the critical conversation right now is when we're looking at the skill and the mindsets of empathy, it's the glue of human relationship. And we know from our research and the understanding of the brain how important relatedness is, a sense of belonging
Hmm.
to a group, as well as status, my sense of feeling enough versus less than. And empathy, and we're going to get really nitty-gritty on to actually the different kinds of empathy here, because how we use empathy can kind of make or break whether someone feels like they belong, that they're included, and that they're enough. When it's done well, we get that sense of you care about me, which if we go to the number one management skill is to show people caring and respect. So this ability to show empathy really well is one of the ways we deliver that management skill. When empathy is not done well, though, it can actually be quite damaging and detrimental
Mm.
and leave people feeling that they don't belong or that they don't are not cared for. So this,
Mm.
yeah, it's an interesting place.
Yeah, yeah. It's almost like, in a sense, you could think of it as empathy is neutral. It depends on how you use empathy, that it's a net positive or a net negative in an interaction or in an environment. And you mentioned there's three different kinds of empathy.
Yes.
Can you speak to those?
Okay, so let's just go. How were you taught what empathy is
Ha like what was I taught? What it was?
and or how to show it?
Oh, how to show it. How was I taught how to show it? I think, to be honest, most of it was modeled and learned kind of subconsciously. But I think, one way that I've been taught is, um you know uh, like, there's skills you can put on to show up empathetic, right? Like, you
Yeah.
can be an active listener, right? Ask
Yeah.
questions, give an
Yeah.
empathetic reflection, right? Kind of relating, like, put basically the idea of, we're imagining we're in that person's shoes. When I'm in
Right.
this person's shoes, how might it feel to be in their shoes? And then say something to demonstrate that you understand or have some modicum of understanding, right? Oh
Yes.
man, that must be really hard for you. Or I can see how that's frustrating. Those type of things. So that's kind of like the surface level of, I think, how I've been taught about empathy.
Yeah, that's great. So what you're modeling is actually what we would call a cognitive perspective taking. So this is the form of empathy that really allows us to stay in our prefrontal cortex, our executive functioning part of the brain, where we have that what's called theory of mind, right? The ability to recognize that I am in my body, I am in my experience, and I am asking what it is like to be in yours. I'm
Mm,
also referencing some point in maybe my experience that might be able to touch into yours. But it is very clear in this place that I am not you and you are not me. That's
mm,
the difference between this healthier form of cognitive perspective taking versus what can really be actually quite damaging and detrimental is what we call affective empathy or feeling empathy. Now, this is the form of empathy that where we attune to each other in a space, right? As physical beings, I am very aware of another human and I'm going to be mirroring you and potentially absorbing things from another person.
mm,
Now, this form of empathy is what often leads to things of burnout or enmeshment, codependency. This is
mm,
the inability in this place to recognize that what I'm feeling and what you're feeling are separate.
mm,
Now, in your world, when you were growing up as a kid, you had some pretty healthy models, it sounds like, about what healthy empathy was, right? That you
mm,
can ask questions and say, what's it like to be in this person's story? There may have been some of us as kids where we were more porous to the world as children, and it was maybe there were things going on, high emotions maybe, or emotions were hard to figure out. So this person's toggle switch is up really high, meaning they're soaking it all in, and the way that they learned
mm,
to feel safe in their environment was to feel what everyone else was feeling.
mm,
And I coach clients, or I see this quite often out in the world as adults now, where this person is the person who shows up at work. They love their job and they love their coworkers, but they leave at the end of the day feeling completely worn out because everyone just keeps bringing them their stuff or dumping their stuff on them, or, they just are
mm,
absorbing everyone else's emotions. And this is a miss. This is an empathy miss where we think we are showing caring or being empathetic by being Velcro for everyone else's emotions.
mm. Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah.
So in the first one, the cognitive perspective taking, this is kind of the imagining game. Like, it's like, I can imagine. I have some theory of mine of what it's like to be. It's kind of it's almost like it stays up in the head, right?
Yes.
Like I can cognitively understand where they're at. And this other one is feeling empathy, which the emphasis is really on the feeling. Like you actually start to feel what it's like to be them. And you also mentioned it's a miss. And I want you to say a little bit more about that. I struggle with the concept that it's a miss or we shouldn't do that. Not because I disagree with that, but because I mean me as well as other people that I know, it's like it doesn't feel like it's a conscious decision to feel
Mm.
the pain of somebody else, right? To take that on, right?
And yeah, and that's key right there. So the work we would do in coaching is to bring more awareness so that we have more agency, right? That we are not Velcro for others, and that
Mm.
we're also reframing that connection and true relationship with someone is does not mean that I don't know where I end and you begin,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? So this cognitive empathy actually drives connection and trust because I'm using skills like perspective taking, curiosity versus judgment. I can recognize emotion, but I'm not owning your emotion, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm validating what you're experiencing
Yeah.
through the process of those reflective words that you used earlier, like, oh, that must have been really exciting. And I reflect it in my tone of my words.
Mm.
I validate what you're feeling by saying, oh, yeah, it makes sense that you would feel pretty frustrated about that. I believe you that that was hard. That ability to validate what someone else is feeling through the cognitive process of putting ourselves in their shoes can be really powerful for
Mm.
ourselves and others in building healthy relationship.
Right.
The miss comes when I think that I'm showing you empathy, but I'm doing things like, well, sympathy, that's a whole other thing. But the miss here is, I don't know if maybe I misused the word miss here for this. When we're using affective empathy, it actually is, again, what contributes to burnout and overwhelm.
Yeah.
And also that enmeshment where I don't know where I end and you begin, and
Yeah.
I've now lost myself in the relationship.
Well, the burnout and overwhelm, I mean, I totally get that. I mean, I'll just give you two quick examples here. You know, I consider myself in that camp of needing to create some awareness, create some boundaries between what I'm kind of feeling and owning as my own emotion versus what I'm just kind of understanding. One is just with my wife Alyssa. I mean, it is, if she is upset about something or feeling a lot of emotions about something, whether or not it has anything to do with me, I can be very uncomfortable in the situation, right? And it's like I have I feel like there's a need to solve something here.
Mhm.
She's not asking for anything to be solved. She's not needing anything to be solved. And what she'll tell me is she's like, just let me feel my emotions, right? And so this has been a growth area for me, and
Yeah.
that has caused, and so anyways, a workplace example for that is, this has happened to me probably like a year or so ago. It's happened many times since then, but the example that comes to mind is just me recognizing I have to give some hard feedback to someone and then seeing them and then giving the feedback, seeing them respond with a lot of emotion, me starting to feel that emotion, and then me starting to walk that feedback back because I want to fix the feeling that I'm feeling
Right.
through the transfer of their feeling to me. So I don't know
Totally.
if that makes any sense, but that's how I see this showing up in my
Yeah.
work.
Well, and let's be honest, we're feeling beings who occasionally think,
Right.
right? And it is more than normal. No one wants to cause pain or to see pain or hurt in people that we care about or love, but even people we don't even know we feel it. And that's what makes us so vitally human.
Mm,
And yet if we're not careful with this, the message here is that if we're not careful with this and learn how to turn the toggle switch down through our own awareness and our own practices, that's when we can get ourselves into that place of it's empathetic distress, right? This place where of burnout and we just don't
mm,
have the capacity. And for you, it sounds like, again, we all have our toolkits when we start to feel discomfort and pain. It makes so much sense that a toolkit and a reaction is to want to fix. Many of us have that, especially as managers and leaders, and oh my gosh, as partners and parents all the time. Kristen Neff is the one who's really been leading the charge here on the practice of mindfulness for this, that emotions are just data. They are signposts that are meant to be felt, expressed, and let go. And that often again, that cognitive form of empathy allows us to feel validated in our emotion. The third form of empathy is compassion. Now, compassion, again, in her work, it's an action-based form of empathy, right? That is the ability to recognize and accept our shared humanity,
Hmm.
that we are all a combination of strength and struggle, and that this ability, though, to, again, cognitively put myself in your shoes and then to offer, it's not about I can fix you. It's not that I'm better than you, but it is, what do you need right now? What does support look like?
Right.
And compassion, it does actually translate into the ability to suffer with. It says, versus, it says, I'm going to be here with you. I'm not going to get in the hole with you. That would be
Mm.
affective empathy. You're down in the hole. I get down in there with you, and now nobody can help. Versus
Mm.
compassion is more about this ability to say, I see you.
Mm.
What you're going through is really hard, and I'm here. What does support look like?
Mm.
So it's
This
an
is
action-based form of empathy, and it's actually quite energizing. One of the things that I see is use the word compassion fatigue, and I would actually argue that compassion is quite energizing to us. It's empathetic distress, right? When we're too much in the affective empathy, that's where we get fatigue and burnout.
yeah. This is super interesting, and I love this. I love how you're kind of comparing the feeling empathy, or what do you call that one?
Affective
The
empathy.
affective
Mhm.
empathy versus compassion. I almost kind of visualize it as like compassion is about help, about support,
Mhm.
when affective empathy is more about owning and fixing. Like that's kind of like what it feels like. I'm owning your emotions, and when I own emotion, it feels like it's now mine to
Mhm.
solve and fix. And I'm actually removing the autonomy from that person by taking the latter route.
Yeah, and I would clarify it's more of the message that your emotion is so uncomfortable to me that I've got to do something
Hmm.
different. And it's a way of invalidating another person's experience. And everyone has their own go-tos. For you, it's fixing. For someone else, it could be just leaving. I mean, everyone has
Hmm.
their own, we all
Right.
have our places we go when we see someone else in pain. And when we feel that pain ourselves, our inability to tolerate the negative emotion leads us then to one of these kind of unhelpful behaviors, or what Brene Brown calls the empathy misses.
Hmm. Right. Oh, well, and you're not. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not really suggesting that we just stop feeling someone else's pain if we feel it. It's more about what we choose to do with that data once we recognize it. Right.
Yeah, and to also just again know yourself, that
Mm.
there are those of us that are just more porous to the world. And again, it could have been a brilliant strategy as a child to be super open and downloading all of the emotional
Mm.
world around me, because I felt as a kid that that's what I needed to do to keep myself safe.
Mm.
And there's others who learned quite differently, that their toggle might be down, and they need to turn it up a little bit so that they're actually aware of other people's feelings. So it's a huge spectrum. And again, it's mostly, a lot of it's very influenced within our family of origin and what we did as a child to feel connected and attached to the system.
Hmm.
It was also what was rewarded and punished about emotions. Were emotions to be felt or shared? Were they to be shoved aside and disqualified, right? So there's a lot of things that kind of come with this that we could unpack. But
Mm.
what we're really looking at is what are the healthiest forms of empathy that we can bring with us into our relationships that benefit myself and the other.
Mm,
And of course, yeah, we are wired to connect, but it's the more awareness that we have, then the more agency we have around how we actually interact with that data.
that makes sense. Yeah. Well, I'll come back to you for in a quick moment here. Again, I'm taking, as my bias goes towards taking a kind of a manager's perspective. It is the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast after all. If I think about this feeling someone's empathy and that dial being turned up too high, I mean, we could start to think about the type of negative consequences that this has. And there's some great research and work by Paul Bloom and his work on empathy that speaks to this.
Yeah.
But for example, um, if my toggle is turned up really high and I'm feeling everybody's pain, it can cloud my decision making.
Absolutely.
I have to make some decisions as a manager that might be hard for some people. And I'm going to be really stuck or just make watered down decisions if I'm not willing to make a decision because I'm just clouded by the empathy.
Mhm.
Another thing is just the whole fairness issue comes into play, right? Like,
Oh,
and there's some interesting research where you show a group of people, the picture of one orphan, and you're asking for donations, right? The amount of donations you'll get for that is like sky high. But as you continue to increase the amount of pictures in your pictures of these orphans, the donations go down. So once I'm up to like here's a whole schoolroom of orphans, like the
right.
donations people are willing to give goes way down. So meaning this is how our brains get wired. If I'm like one on one with somebody, I feel a lot of empathy. But if I'm looking at the group level, I might be less likely to feel what's best for that whole group as a whole. And
Yes.
so if that toggle is turned up too high, I might end up making a decision that really benefits one person because they were in the room at the time sharing their emotions, but I have a negative effect on the other 20
Mhm.
people in the group. So this is where it can, I think, get in our way a little bit. But
Oh, we could keep going. So we could go that way where we're feeling we have the toggle turned up too high. If we go the other way, and if this person is, we'll just, if they're using fear as a way of leadership, we can
mm,
also, there, now we start to demonize compassion. We demonize the word empathy and we say we don't need that. And
mm,
again, it can make, or that those become things that are almost punished, right? And if, or we're leading without any of those behaviors. Of course, that's going to be if we are trying to use fear or even acts of cruelty to try to maintain status quo. And of course, like we can't have people send rescuing orphans or like we can't have empathy because then
mm,
if we start to care about each other, if we start to care and have acts of compassion, then that person would lose power over. So again, we could kind of this can
two
go
ends of this. Yeah.
it can go either way. And I think it is important to kind of look at what are the messages in the world currently around some of these things, especially coming from our leaders.
hmm Yeah. Yeah. I hear you there. For the remainder of time we have, I know again you're speaking, wisely to the two ends of the spectrum, and we shouldn't focus on just toggling down, right? There's a toggling up element of this. But if I am going to imagine that most of the people that listen to this podcast would probably put themselves a little bit more on the end of maybe needing to toggle down at times. Again, it is the
Yes, I
Managing with
agree.
Mind and Heart podcast, and we attract a certain audience here.
I agree.
But I'm curious, do you have any maybe thoughts on some practices for people like me, to be honest, that could probably benefit a little bit more at times of turning down the actual feeling what they're feeling because we know it can get in our way at times.
Yeah. Oh, such a good question. And I'm so right there with you. It's yeah, especially the world is a lot right now, and there's a lot of feeling. Yeah, people we love and people we care about. Okay, so the word we're talking about is boundaries. Well, actually, let's back up. Number one, you mentioned it, I've mentioned it. It's self-awareness, and this I am going to use this word mindfulness. It's just paying attention to what's here in the present. So the more I can actually know myself, then the better I'm actually going to be to implement any of these other tools. But I've got to know where I'm at to know where I want to be. So, are you a person that tends to be pretty porous, right? Or and feel that you're pretty sensitive in that way that you recognize you feel what other people are feeling pretty quickly? And again, try to hold this without judgment. It's not good or bad. It serves its purpose and can be a superpower on either way. It's just we want to be aware of it. And we want to gain more access to turning up and down that toggle when we want it.
Yeah.
If I'm leading a meeting and I am, like you said, so caught up in everybody's emotions that I'm having trouble to make a decision, I'm going to have to be able to turn that down. I'm going to have to recognize and use the ability to, what's in the best interest of the business or the organization to make the
Yeah.
decision, turn it down. There's going to be times if you come to see me in a one-on-one and you're telling me about that your daughter was up all night sick and you couldn't get that report, I'm going to need to turn it up a little bit, maybe, see what's for the benefit here.
Right.
So self-awareness is key. Know where you're at. What's your tendency? Second thing we're going to talk about is just that word boundaries, right? And I love Dr. Becky's work. She defines this as what's okay and what's not okay. Actually, no, I think that's Brene Brown. What's okay and what's not okay. And Dr. Becky, she says that boundaries are it's when I state that I'm going to do something and it doesn't require anything of you.
Hmm.
So it's this reminder that if you start talking to me in the hallway at the office about something, even if it is about your daughter, who I deeply care about, but I've got this thing going on and I am so preoccupied and I've got a deadline, I have got to be able to say, Ethan, I really care about Kira and your life. And you know what? I've got something else to take care of. So can we talk about this some other time? So this ability to, even in those moments where it feels hard or we're afraid of hurting someone's feelings, what to be able to give ourselves some boundaries on what's
Hmm.
okay and what's not okay.
Yeah.
So it's
I will leave boundaries alone for a moment just because it's such a, I mean, I think it's incredibly important. We may have to do another episode just on helping people think through the type of boundaries that they may need to create to be able to show up the way they want to show up. You mentioned, of course, mindfulness as a maybe the foundational element to this. Like we got to actually recognize and experience in full what we are experiencing in a moment, right? That I will just say that like I know for some people they hear mindfulness and they think, oh great, I'm gonna have to adopt a meditation practice. I don't got time for that. I would just say that like part of mindfulness is just building in space in your day, right? Like when you're riding the bus, when you're driving, when you're making dinner or whatever, like just not having your phone or not listening to this podcast when you're doing it. Like taking a walk with no distractions. Like these are like you don't have to do anything crazy to start recognizing a little bit more how you are experiencing things in moments of just filling
yeah,
that those gaps.
I so
Well,
agree with
mhm.
you.
I wanted to give a nod to that, and I also just wanted to give a nod to, again, we're again this idea of at times we may need to turn down the toggle of feeling the empathy, and just a reminder that turning down the empathy toggle and showing up kind with care and respect and gentle are not mutually exclusive. Like we can turn down the feeling what you're feeling while still being able to show up in a supportive way. And I think if I'm following you, that's what would coming back to that cognitive perspective taking.
Yes. And in the one thing that I'd love people to end on here or to think about, I have found this to be really helpful in my work, not just as a coach, but especially as a parent, is that feelings are, again, remember that it's just the ability to feel them, acknowledge them, right? And then move on. But if we don't actually just do that, they will keep perpetuating. So it's a really easy thing to do as a manager when someone's like, "Oh, I'm feeling this from the weekend, blah blah blah," and we are so focused on the outcome, we just say, "Ah, whatever, you should get over that and move on." Or, with our kids, I do it all the time. I don't want to go to school, and I'm like, "Yeah, too bad you need to get over it." But if we just do this little bit of practice that says, "You know what, Ethan? I believe you. It seems like that's really hard, and I believe you." And just by adding I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with what someone is doing, saying, or experiencing, but I'm just validating that their emotions are real.
Mm,
I'm not saying it's a soup like a magic wand to get your kids out the door for school or get that employee to do what you want, but I will tell you, it has been sometimes it can be that remember that when people are feeling things, one of the biggest questions they're just asking is, am I real? And what I
mm,
feel and what I'm feeling okay? And who
mm,
in the world, maybe this person has never in their life had their feelings validated by
mm,
anyone else, especially someone with authority. And when we can do that as a leader, we have real power to use empathy for and compassion for the magic it's meant to be, where someone else feels seen. And I think that's pretty cool.
that is awesome. Well, Hana, thank you for this. This is really cool, and you've piqued my interest on this topic, and I know you have much more knowledge and information that's ready to burst out of your head, and we'll have to circle back to this at a later time as well. But appreciate you coming on the show. Appreciate you sharing some of your learnings and knowledge with this, and I believe you. Everything you're saying here, I believe you.
Thanks, Ethan. Thanks.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.